But as we start the 13th chapter of the Mishnah of Yevamot, we get into the question of girls who are underage and their relationship to Yibum, to levirate marriage. But of course, in order to examine their relationship to levirate marriage, we need to understand their relationship with marriage per se. And we've always mentioned that this tractate is not just defining levirate marriage, Yibum, it's actually defining marriage. So we're now going to get into questions of a minor getting married. And in order to understand that, we need to look at a verse, a pasuk from Devarim. And in fact, we're going to learn the Mishnayot today out of order, which is very unusual, but I think they're easier to learn out of order. But let's start with the verse. We're in Devarim. We're in chapter 22 of Deuteronomy. The Amar Avianar el Azakenim, the girl's father shall say to the elders. The context is actually a dispute about virginity, but it's not important. The context is not important. You'll see in a minute the Sifrei will learn out of the verse. The Amar Avihanar el Azakenim, the girl's father will say to the elders, Et biti natati la ish hazeh leisha va yisna eha. I gave my daughter to this man as a wife, and he hated her. I gave my daughter as a wife, and he hated her. And we don't need to know what he hated her about or what the reasons are. But the Sifrei, the halachic midrash on Devarim, says at this point, Et biti natati la'ish hazeh, I gave my daughter to this man. Melamed sheharoshut la'av lakadesh et bito ktana. We are taught from this that the father has a right to betroth his minor daughter. So the halachic midrash is going to learn that a father can betroth his minor daughter. And we can have long discussions about this in the Mishnah of Kiddushin, in the Mishnah of betrothal. And the Gemara there, by the way, doesn't like this idea very much at all. It doesn't like it at all. And essentially the Gemara, that the Mishnah declares that a father can do this, the Gemara really turns it upside down and says, no, you shouldn't do it at all. And there's a discussion in Tosafot from medieval times about the fact, and Rabbi Herzfeld brought this discussion. There's a discussion in Tosafot at this point in Kiddushin about the fact that when there are chaotic persecutions and when there's turmoil in the world, sometimes you need to betroth your daughter when she's underage because you don't know whether you're going to have an opportunity to betroth her when she grows up. In other words, the uncertainty in the world is such that we're forced to do this. But the clear implication from Tosafot there is that we don't like doing it. Following the Gemara, we don't like doing it. Maybe we have to do it. But anyway, the halacha is, from the point of view of the Torah law, it's possible to do it. And so we now get into the question of refusal. And now this is the second Mishnah of the 13th chapter. We'll go back and look at the first Mishnah in a minute, but we're going to start with the second Mishnah. We're going to start out of order. And the Mishnah is going to ask, what minor girl must make a declaration of refusal? Because under certain circumstances, we're going to see that a minor who is betrothed, so she's betrothed before she reaches the ability to fully consent as an adult, sometimes she has to give consent when she reaches the age of majority. Otherwise, the marriage is null and void. And so the Mishnah is asking, well, what kind of minors have to give their consent to stop the marriage becoming null and void? And the Mishnah answers, Kol hisi ata ima or acheha leda'ata. Any whose mother or whose brothers have given her in marriage with her consent. So the scenario that the Mishnah is painting is one in which the father of this girl is no longer alive. He's no longer around. So the halachic midrash has learned in Sifrei Devarim, we learned. We learned that a father has a right to betroth his minor daughter. And she should at this point, by the way, give her consent. And that essentially the sense of the Gemara in Kiddushin is she should give her consent at this point. But this right only applies to the father. What if the father is no longer alive? So the Mishnah is ruling that, and the Mishnah knows that if the father's no longer alive, the mother or the brothers could betroth this minor girl, but they don't have the right, according to Torah law, to do this. They don't have the right to do this. Therefore, she needs to, if you like, she has the right to refuse right until she reaches the age of majority. So in other words, they can betroth her, but she can refuse. And so the Mishnah is asking, well, what kind of girl refuses someone whose mother or brothers have given her in marriage with her consent? With her consent. So she consents, but she can change her mind. If they gave her in marriage without her consent, she does not need to refuse. I.e., she can just walk out. There's no, she's not bound. If she doesn't consent, she's not bound by the transaction. But if she does consent, she has the right to refuse. That's the scenario the Mishnah is painting. Rabbi Hanania ben Antigonos. So Rabbi Hanania ben Antigonos in this manuscript, Omer, he says, Kol tinoket she'eina yechola lishmor et kiddusheha eina tzricha lama'en. Any child who is unable to take care of her tokens of betrothal, this will be the marriage contract or the silver. This might be the ring that she receives on betrothal, or the betrothal document, or the marriage document. If she's insufficiently old to actually understand that she needs to hold on to these things, then again, she's not considered to have really validly given her consent at all. So again, she doesn't need to refuse because essentially nothing has happened. If she doesn't have that basic level of understanding, nothing has happened. And Rabbi Eliezer is going to go further. Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ein ma'aseh ktana ela ki mefuta. The act of a minor, and he's talking about the marriage process here, is just a seduction. Ein ma'aseh ktana ela ki mefuta. It's just a seduction. In other words, it doesn't have any legal validity at all. But Yisrael la Kohen lo tuchal bi truma. But Kohen li Yisrael tuchal bi truma. And the implications are that if Bat Yisrael, if an ordinary Israelite married a Kohen, she can't eat truma. She can't eat truma because this process has no legal validity. And similarly, Vat Kohen li Yisrael tuchal bi truma. A daughter of a Kohen married to an Israelite, she can carry on eating truma as if she's in her father's house. So in other words, as far as Rabbi Eliezer is concerned, this process doesn't exist really for a minor. So that's the context. That's the context. The girl is going to make a declaration of refusal, or she has the right to make a declaration of a refusal. So now we understand that. Now we understand, if you like, the context from the second Mishnah. And we've said, by the way, that very often through the tractate of Yevamot, the Mishnah sort of outlines something and then explains it later. So maybe that's what we've done here. Now we sort of understand what is going on. We can now look at the first Mishnah of the chapter. Okay, so we're going to go back to the beginning of the chapter. Beit Shammai Omrim. Ein mema'anin ela arusot. Beit Shammai say the only people that can refuse are those who are betrothed. i.e., once you're married, you can't do this anymore. Uveit Hillel omrim, arusot unusot, and Beit Hillel say both those who are betrothed and those who are married, they can still refuse right up to the age of 12. Beit Shammai omrim, babal. Beit Shammai say that the refusal goes to the husband. Uveit Hillel omrim, babal uvayabam. Now you see we're getting into Yevamot. Beit Hillel say she can refuse to the husband and she can refuse to the Yavam. In other words, she can say to the Yavam that she doesn't want to do this. Beit Shammai would say, by the way, that she cannot, so Beit Shammai, I think, would probably say she can do chalitza. I think Beit Shammai would say she can do chalitza for the, no, she can't do chalitza. So if she can't refuse and she can't do chalitza, she's really stuck. Beit Shammai omrim, b'fanav. Beit Shammai say she can only refuse in the presence of the husband. Uveit Hillel omrim, b'fanav v'shelo b'fanav. Doesn't matter whether he's there or not. Really interesting question about if we, there's a lot of discussion now about coercive control, psychological pressure. Maybe she doesn't want to say to the husband, look, I don't want to marry you. Beit Hillel is saying, look, you don't have to say to his face, you don't want to marry him, as long as you can refuse him without telling him directly. B'fanav v'shelo b'fanav. Either in his presence or not in his presence, the refusal works. Beit Shammai omer, b'veit din. Beit Shammai say you need a bet din. Uveit Hillel omrim, b'veit din v'shelo b'veit din. Beit Hillel is saying you don't need a beit din. Now, Beit Hillel are going to say you need you need witnesses. So this is a bit like our original discussion about the chalitza. Do you need a bet din, a qualified bet din, or just bet din hidyot, a bet din just composed of ordinary people? And Beit Hillel will rule that we need 2 witnesses at least. So we're very close to a bet din. She can't just go out in the field and say, I refuse. So we need witnesses, but it doesn't need to be a full bet din and certainly not an expert bet din. Amru Beit Hillel Beit Shammai. So Beit Hillel said to Beit Shammai, Mama'enet hi ktana afilu arba'a v'chamisha pa'amim. Beit Hillel said to Beit Shammai, she can actually exercise the right of refusal while she's a minor 4 or 5 times. In other words, her mother and her brother could marry her off and she can refuse, and then marry her off again and she can refuse. And we can do this 4 or 5 times. We can do a cycle. Amru lahem Beit Shammai, and Beit Shammai don't like this idea very much. I think the halacha probably goes according to Beit Hillel. I'm not sure. Anyway, Amru lahem Beit Shammai, they don't like this. Ein benot Yisrael hefker. The daughters of Israel are not like ownerless property. In other words, you can't pass a girl around from husband to husband like this. Ela she mima'enet umam tenet ad shetagdil. She makes a declaration of refusal, and then she waits until she becomes of age. Or utama'en vetinase, or she makes a declaration of refusal, and then she marries someone properly. And I think the implication is that she can't make a refusal second time round. So we can see a little bit, if you like, the views of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai in terms of, well, the question of consent. And it's interesting that this Mishnah, it seems at one level very dated, but another level, it seems incredibly modern.